On August 4th, 2026, Mexican content creator Cesar Gastelum went live from outside a fast food restaurant in Culiacan, Sinaloa.
Vámonos, chicos. No, la moto.
Alongside two of his friends, he was taking part in a social media challenge that involved dressing as a food delivery driver. The three wore bright delivery clothing and backpacks as they joked around outside the restaurant, turning what appeared to be an ordinary evening into content for the hundreds of thousands of people who followed Cesar online. Nothing about the stream initially suggested that anything was wrong, but shortly before everything changed, the group noticed something nearby.
No, oiga, me sentí bien mal, oiga.
No, esos chavos me han miedo. Un cascazo esa marega y sí.
Guajiro, ¿te acuerdas cuando nos asaltaron en un camión?
Their attention suddenly shifted toward a motorcycle passing through the area. One of Cesar's friends can be heard drawing attention to it, while Cesar himself appears noticeably uneasy about the people riding past them. At the time, it was only a brief moment during an otherwise normal live stream. Minutes later, however, another motorcycle carrying two people approached the group, and this time, it did not simply pass by. Everything changed within seconds, with the attack unfolding while the camera was still recording. The two friends standing with Cesar were not physically injured, but Cesar was killed in the attack. The people on the motorcycle immediately fled, while authorities responded to the scene and began investigating what had just happened. Only afterward did the earlier moment involving the motorcycle become much more unsettling. There is no evidence that Cesar or his friends knew an attack was about to take place, and investigators have not publicly established that the people they noticed earlier were the same people responsible. But knowing what happened only minutes later makes that brief moment in the live stream extremely difficult to ignore. After Cesar's death, investigators began looking into his social media activity, as some of his previous posts had reportedly referenced a criminal faction operating in the region. This immediately raised questions about whether his online presence could have played a role in the attack, although authorities have never publicly confirmed a motive. One of the friends who had been with him that night later described losing Cesar as the worst day of his life, saying they had simply been two young people trying to build something together. And that is what makes the footage so difficult to watch in hindsight. What began as three friends filming an ordinary social media challenge ended only minutes later with the same live stream capturing Cesar Gastelum's final moments. But in the next case, the danger didn't approach from the street. It came directly through the victim's front door. During the night of June 22nd into June 23rd, 2025, 25-year-old Venezuelan content creator Gabriel Sarmiento Rodriguez started a live stream from his home in Maracay. Gabriel had become known online for publicly accusing criminal organizations and police officers of corruption, and he had previously claimed that some of the people he spoke about had threatened him because of what he was posting. Rather than making those accusations anonymously, Gabriel regularly appeared on camera himself, openly naming individuals he believed were involved. That night, however, the danger he had been warning about suddenly appeared to reach his own front door. Partway through the live stream, Gabriel's attention shifted away from the camera after he heard people forcing their way into the house. His mother could be heard screaming in the background, making it clear that whatever was happening was very bad.
Sevi, calle JJ Montesinos, Piñonal. El que me llamó, necesito que se presente en el Piñonal, calle JJ Montesinos. Piñonal, calle JJ Montesinos. Piñonal, calle JJ Montesinos.
Realizing how serious the situation was, Gabriel began shouting his location into the phone and desperately asking anyone watching to contact the authorities. But Gabriel didn't stop there. As the sounds grew closer, he began naming people and police officers he believed could be responsible for what was happening, essentially using the live stream to leave behind a record of who he feared in case he didn't survive. The situation had gone from Gabriel talking to viewers to complete panic within only moments. And before he had any real chance to escape, 2 armed men entered the house. What followed was still being broadcast live.
¡Me dispararon! ¡Me dispararon! Hermano, ¿qué pasó? ¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué pasó?
Gabriel pleaded for help as the attackers moved toward him, but the confrontation ended with multiple shots being fired as the live stream abruptly cut out. Gabriel died during the attack, while his mother was also shot in the abdomen and had to be taken to hospital. The killing immediately drew attention across Venezuela, especially because Gabriel had spent so much time publicly claiming that criminal groups and corrupt officials wanted to silence him. Prosecutors opened an investigation into the attack, but the fact that Gabriel had made so many serious accusations also meant speculation surrounding the motive spread almost immediately. And that is what makes the live stream especially disturbing to watch back. Gabriel wasn't simply recording an unexpected attack without understanding what was happening. The moment he heard people entering the house, he appeared to understand exactly how serious the situation was. Instead of immediately ending the live stream, he kept the camera running, repeatedly gave viewers his location, and began naming the people he feared could be connected to what was about to happen. Only minutes earlier, those names had been accusations made through a phone screen. Then Gabriel heard someone breaking into his home. His mother began screaming in the background, and the live stream he had used to expose the people he believed were dangerous became the final recording of his life. But not every final moment begins with an obvious threat. Sometimes the first warning is something almost impossible to notice. On April 24, 2025, Nigerian TikTok creator Joshua, known online as Disturbing40, started another live stream from outside his home. There was nothing unusual about him being live. Joshua regularly streamed himself talking to followers, listening to music, and simply going about his day. And that afternoon appeared to be no different. His wife, who was pregnant at the time, was nearby preparing food while Joshua remained outside in front of the camera. For several minutes, everything appeared normal. Then his behavior suddenly changed. Joshua stopped talking and stared into the distance. At first, it was subtle enough that someone unfamiliar with seizures might not immediately realize what was happening. He seemed almost frozen, looking away from the camera as though he had suddenly become disconnected from everything around him. But only seconds later, the situation became unmistakably serious. Joshua's face began pulling to one side before his head moved backward and his entire body went into a violent seizure. He remained on camera as the episode continued, eventually falling forward and collapsing onto the ground. During the fall, he struck his head on a rock. By the time his wife and others reached him, Joshua was unresponsive. People initially tried desperately to help him at the scene before he was rushed to hospital and placed on oxygen. But his condition never improved. He continued suffering seizures and failed to regain consciousness. Joshua died the following day. Afterward, however, his wife revealed an important detail that completely changed how the beginning of the footage looked in hindsight. According to her, this had not been Joshua's first seizure. He had experienced previous episodes, was taking medication for them, and had reportedly suffered another seizure only a few months earlier. His mother later questioned that explanation and suggested something more unusual may have been responsible, which led to speculation online. But Joshua's wife maintained that he had already been dealing with seizures before the live stream. And knowing that, makes those first few seconds especially unsettling. Before Joshua collapsed, before anyone around him realized he was in danger, the camera had already captured the first sign. That quiet moment where he suddenly stopped talking and stared into the distance wasn't simply an awkward pause in the live stream. It may have been the moment his final medical emergency had already begun. The next case, however, involved a danger of an entirely different kind. On October 1st, 2025, 23-year-old climber Balon Miller was nearing the end of an exhausting 6-day climb on El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. Balon wasn't an inexperienced climber taking an unnecessary risk. He had spent most of his life climbing and had already completed extremely difficult solo ascents around the world. And on this particular climb, the hardest part was essentially behind him. After spending days thousands of feet above the ground, Balon had reached the top of the route. But before he could completely finish, he noticed that his haul bag containing his gear had become stuck in the ropes a short distance below him. It should have been a relatively simple problem. Balon rappelled back down to free the bag while another person far below continued filming his climb through a telescope and broadcasting it online. But somewhere during that descent, one crucial detail had been missed. The rope he was descending on wasn't long enough. Balon continued rappelling toward the bag until, without realizing how close he was to the end, he suddenly ran completely out of rope, and there was nothing beneath him to stop the fall. He dropped from the end of the line and began falling down the face of El Capitan. As he passed the trapped gear, Balon reportedly reached toward another line in an attempt to grab onto something, but he was already moving too quickly. Within seconds, he disappeared down the wall. People watching from below immediately realized what had happened, and emergency crews were sent into the area. But after falling several hundred feet, Balon did not survive. And what makes his final moments especially difficult to watch is how close he had been to walking away from the mountain safely. He had already spent 6 days exposed to one of the world's most famous rock faces. He had made it through the exhausting climb and had effectively reached the end. The mistake didn't happen during one of the most difficult sections of the ascent. It happened because one final piece of equipment was stuck only a short distance below him. After surviving thousands of feet of climbing, Balon went back down for his gear, and that one final descent became the last one he would ever make. The next case, however, began in circumstances that couldn't have seemed more ordinary. On the morning of March 9th, 2026, 39-year-old Chinese live streamer Wong Yefei, better known online as Sister Wang Jia, began another ordinary broadcast selling women's clothing to her followers. She had done this countless times before, spending long hours in front of the camera trying on clothes and speaking directly to viewers. And for the first half hour, there was nothing to suggest that this particular stream would be any different. Then, around 36 minutes into the broadcast, Wong suddenly reached toward the back of her head and neck and told the people around her that she was in pain. At first, she tried to continue.
好了，好了呗，好了，好疼。这是2个。哎，等，过去不足。哎呀，哎，咋回事？快！哎呀。 哎，咋回事？这脑袋一下，哎呀，好难受，快！
Rather than immediately ending the live stream, Wong remained in front of the camera while the pain became noticeably worse. She repeatedly held her head and neck, told those around her that she felt terrible, and eventually said that her legs were becoming weak. Within only a couple of minutes, what had looked like a normal fashion live stream had turned into an obvious medical emergency.
哎，不行了，腿还是软的了。哎，多多在不在直播间？哎，快，来给我打个120，快！哎，不行了，哎，不行了，我马上摔倒了。哎，多多快！
Wong began urgently asking someone nearby to call 120, China's emergency number, telling them that she felt as though she was about to collapse. Moments later, the live stream ended. She was rushed to hospital, where reports later said she had suffered a brainstem hemorrhage. Despite attempts to save her, Wong died shortly afterward, leaving behind a young daughter. And only after her death did people close to Wong begin revealing details that made the footage even more unsettling. A friend said that although Wong had generally appeared healthy, she worked extremely hard and regularly slept for relatively short periods. She had also reportedly mentioned experiencing occasional headaches before the Chinese New Year, although there is no evidence that she or anyone around her knew those earlier symptoms were connected to what would eventually happen. That distinction is important, because doctors commenting afterward cautioned that the limited public information was not enough to determine precisely what underlying condition caused the hemorrhage. What was clear was how suddenly her condition deteriorated once the symptoms began. And that is what makes the live stream so frightening in hindsight. There was no accident approaching in the distance and no attacker entering the room. For most of the broadcast, Wong was simply doing her job exactly as she had done before. Then she touched the back of her head. Within minutes, she was struggling to remain standing, asking the people around her to call an ambulance, and shortly afterward, the live stream was over. To the viewers watching that morning, it initially looked like she had suddenly become unwell and would simply return once she recovered. Instead, they had unknowingly watched the final minutes of Wong Yefei's life. And that takes us to the final, one that case didn't end when the live stream stopped. In many ways, that was only the beginning. On November 3rd, 2025, TikTok creator Tynesha McCarty-Roten was live streaming while driving through Illinois, actively talking to viewers and repeatedly looking away from the road to interact with her phones.
If it was me, okay, he might get a little bit more motion. He might get a little bit more satisfaction because a lot of people don't fuck with me. A lot of people have been waiting to see some exposure. That shit might pop, right?
What made the situation even more concerning was that she wasn't alone. Her 8-year-old grandchild was sitting in the back of the car while Tynesha continued driving through evening traffic, seemingly giving more and more of her attention to the live stream instead of what was happening in front of her.
After you show all this, you still lost her. She's still gone. You still calling her pretty today, so clearly you can't handle no pretty bitch. You need to start with the poozies. I'm sorry.
For around 20 minutes, that pattern continued without anything going wrong, until Tynesha approached an intersection and there was a sudden impact.
Something he tried to say, like, I don't know, it was weird, like, so, fuck!
Her grandchild immediately asked what had happened, and Tynesha quickly realized that she had hit someone. The person outside the vehicle was 59-year-old Darren Lucas, who had just finished working at a nearby grocery store and was making his way home when he was struck.
I don't know, it was weird, like, so, fuck!
Who was
Let me
that?
call you right
Okay.
now. Oh, fuck.
Who was that?
Fuck. I'm gonna take somebody.
You okay?
Emergency responders rushed Darren to the hospital, but his injuries were too severe, and he died shortly afterward. When police began questioning Tynesha at the scene, she told them that she believed the traffic light had been green and suggested that Darren had entered the road unexpectedly. What she apparently did not immediately tell investigators, however, was that she had been live streaming in the moments leading up to the collision. At first, officers had little evidence to directly contradict her account, But that changed when people who had been watching the live stream began sending recordings of it to police. Investigators were then able to compare what Tynesha had told them with footage from both the live stream and nearby surveillance cameras. And according to authorities, the evidence appeared to show that the traffic signal had actually been read when she entered the intersection. The live stream itself also became important evidence because investigators were able to connect the recording to the exact time of the crash and examine what Tynesha had been doing immediately beforehand. The same stream that had been distracting her while she drove was now helping investigators reconstruct how Darren had lost his life. But the backlash surrounding the case became even more intense only a few days later. Tynesha returned to TikTok and told her followers that everything that had happened was affecting her mentally and that she planned to step away from hosting her usual live streams for a while.
Y'all already know me, right? So y'all know if my mind isn't in full capacity, it's hard for me to host lives. I won't really be here long. I won't be on live until my mind is on full capacity. So it's allowed me because I want y'all to have the, want y'all to be able to have the part of me, you know what I'm saying, where, I'm not distracted or anything like that. Yeah, my Cash App up there if y'all want to support while I'm on mental leave. I don't like asking y'all for shit. But if y'all find it in y'all heart, and y'all want to support, my Cash App is right there.
She placed her Cash App information on screen and asked viewers to financially support her during that break. For many people, that was the moment the case became even harder to understand. An innocent man had just died, yet instead of the attention being on Darren or the family he had left behind, viewers watched Tynesha return online and ask for financial support for herself. And the case still wasn't over. Weeks later, investigators arrested Tynesha on charges connected to Darren's death, and when officers arrived at her home with the warrant, authorities said they found her with several packed bags, raising further questions about whether she had been preparing to leave. Her criminal case has involved disputed allegations, and the final legal responsibility remains something for the court to determine. But regardless of how that case ultimately ends, one detail makes the footage especially disturbing. Darren Lucas had absolutely nothing to do with the live stream that captured the final moments of his life. He wasn't filming himself, he wasn't watching the broadcast, and he had no idea that someone inside a passing vehicle was talking to an online audience. He had simply finished work and was making his way home when he crossed paths with a driver whose attention was somewhere else. And within seconds, a live stream Darren never chose to be part of had recorded the final moments of his life. That's all for today, folks. If you like to see more of this creepy content, click on the video on screen.